You know what you're listening to?
Is that a trick question?
It's the I Still Love This Game podcast with your host, Matthew Damian.
He's an idiot. Don't listen to this. He's an idiot.
Hello and welcome to episode 77 of the I Still Love This Game podcast. And as promised, we're continuing our NBA Draft Hypothetical series. And we've got an incredible topic lined up today. And you know what? That's saying something because we've already seen the NBA turn on its head in our two previous episodes. First, we had Carmelo getting drafted by the Pistons. Then we had Kevin Durant being selected by Portland. But trust me when I say this, they pale in comparison to this week's show. Which is, of course, what would have happened had Charlotte not traded the draft rights of Kobe for Vlade Divac. There is so much to cover here, so let's not waste any time and dive right in. Now, following the 96 season, the Lakers and the Hornets found themselves in similar positions heading into the offseason. They both had veteran talent, but with fears of being stuck as just, quote, good teams, they were looking to make the leap to become contenders. The Lakers had just finished up with the swan song of Magic Johnson, and with a nucleus of Eddie Johnson, Nick Van Exel, Cedric Ceballos, and Vlade Divac, the Lakers management wanted to make a run to get Shaquille O'Neal. The only problem was cap space, and in order to get enough cap space, they started to offload contracts. Anthony Peeler and George Lynch were shown the door, but the most surprising move was trading Vlade Divac for the draft rights of Kobe Bryant. Now, Jerry West had seen Kobe work out and was in awe, but he wasn't confident that the Lakers would fall to the Lakers' 24th pick. So in a deal that killed two birds with one stone, he offloaded Divac's contract while also picking up the draft rights of Kobe. Now, I can guess what you're thinking right now, and that's a cute story, but how does that apply to this situation? If the Hornets never traded Kobe for Divac, then they would keep Kobe. Well, that's not true. The Hornets had never even worked out Kobe. And whilst there was talk that Philly might actually draft Kobe first overall based off his impressive workouts against their star guard, Jerry Stackhouse, Kobe was slipping. Simply put, Kobe was not on their radar as a player that could help them win immediately. And if you look at the moves that they were making, such as obviously trading for Divac, trading Larry Johnson for Anthony Mason, etc., you could see the direction that they were going. A high school player, regardless of his potential, couldn't help them get back in the playoffs. So had the Lakers not traded for Kobe, there's very little chance that he would have gone number 13. Instead, the Hornets more than likely would have gone for John Wallace, a forward from Syracuse with an NBA-ready body, and who was also considered a sleeper in the draft. Sacramento was the next selection, but there's no way Kobe would have been interested in playing for the Kings in the small market of Sacramento. The Suns were next up, and they have admitted that they always had their eye on Steve Nash. So I find it hard to believe they would have gone in a different direction and drafted Kobe instead. Now, what could have happened is the Suns could have made a deal involving either Sam Cassell or Robert Horry to Charlotte for the draft rights of Kobe Bryant. Because Robert Horry and Sam Cassell, they were both somewhat expendable. And then you could have had a situation where Phoenix could have swiped both Steve Nash and Kobe in the draft. But with Kevin Johnson and Michael Finley already on the roster, I'm not sure that the Suns were in a complete rebuild mode yet. Now that brings us to New York. The Knicks had 3 of the next 4 picks, including the next 2 in a row. Is it not possible that they roll the dice here with one of those picks and pick up Kobe? I'd say absolutely. And that's where we begin this. Kobe is drafted by the Knicks to play alongside Patrick Ewing and behind Allen Houston and John Starks, in the only market that even compares to Los Angeles in terms of size and significance. The Knicks themselves were loading up for a splash in free agency, and they had their sights set on a dream lineup of Patrick Ewing, Charles Barkley, Larry Johnson, Michael Jordan, and Gary Payton. They had to settle with trading Mason to Charlotte, signing Allen Houston and Chris Childs. Now, even though they fell short of getting Hall of Famers in Jordan, Payton, and Barkley, they still didn't have any need for Divac with Ewing still there. Plus, they were well over the cap with all those big contracts, so there's no way the Lakers could get him via trade. And because of the size of the New York market, Kobe doesn't force a trade to the Lakers. And with the Knicks loaded at both guard positions, at least from a depth standpoint, I've already mentioned Allen Houston and John Starks playing the 2, but they also had Chris Childs and Charlie Ward playing the point. But they are surprisingly thin at the 3 position. They do have Larry Johnson playing that position, but he's not nearly as athletic as what he once was. And he was much more of a 4, even though he was generously listed at 6'8". The Knicks also had Charles Oakley playing the 4. So they had 2 former All-Stars at power forward, but once again, no legitimate small forward. So whilst Kobe was as thin as you can imagine at 17 years old, he would get minutes playing the 3. What also helps him is coaching. Jeff Van Gundy, for all his immaturity as a commentator, was a far superior coach than Del Harris was at the time. Kobe would have also benefited from having a much stronger veteran presence in the locker room, with Ewing, Oakley and Starks all being battle-tested. They would have toughened up Kobe, especially Oakley when you think about his relationship with Jordan in Chicago. And Jordan viewed Oakley as an invaluable enforcer. The impact of Kobe in New York, however, would not truly be felt until next season, but as a rookie, he'd make the Knicks a quicker and more versatile team. But now think back to what I said earlier about the Lakers' motivation in trading Divac for Kobe. The first was obviously to get Bryant, but the other was to clear cap space to sign Shaq. Despite not being able to get Bryant, the Lakers were still hell-bent on picking up O'Neal, and that means they would still pursue trade options. Vlade insists that he won't go to an expansion team like Anthony Peja did when he was traded to Vancouver. And it's the Utah Jazz who offer backup point guard Howard Eisley, who is still on a rookie contract, to help free up cap space. At first, the Lakers demand Byron Russell, but the Jazz would not part ways with the 90s version of Craig Elo after his breakout performance in the 96 playoffs. The Sonics are also contenders to get Vlade, but with a veteran roster, they don't have a young player of Eisley's capabilities to offer Los Angeles with a small contract, which is the exact reason why the Lakers are making this deal. The Jets also have to throw in a couple of first-rounders, but they're fine with that as they're expecting to win 55 to 60 games each season with a lineup of Vlade, Malone, Russell, Hornacek and Stockton. The Lakers still pick up Shaq, and the Rockets still acquire Barkley, but with the Sonics imploding due to the McIlvaine-Shawn Kemp drama, Utah becomes a team to beat in the West. Divac's defensive abilities, plus his passing skills, along with the ability to score in the post, gives the Jazz another scorer to complement Malone, and they challenge Chicago even more than they did in reality. Malone walks away with the MVP for the first time in his career, and the Jazz steamroll their way to the NBA Finals. Back in the Eastern Conference, the Bulls are still enjoying the momentum of their record-breaking season in '96, but this time Utah is keeping pace, so Chicago is not satisfied with 69 wins as they want home court advantage in the NBA Finals, and they finish up with 71 wins this season. Without Divac, Charlotte is the 8th seed, and even with Glenn Rice in his prime, they're taken care of by a sweep by the Bulls. The Knicks take out the Orlando Magic without Shaq, but Kobe is given the task of going up against Penny Hardaway, and he's starting to show signs on the defensive end of the court that he's a valuable member of this team. The Knicks move on to face the Heat, but there will be no repeat of the PJ Brown and Charlie Ward street fight, and the Knicks eliminate Miami in 6 games. And that gives us one hell of an Eastern Conference Finals between New York and Chicago. The Knicks have a decided edge inside, with Ewing, Oakley and Grandmama, but the Bulls still own the perimeter. Kobe, while showing promising signs against Penny, has no hope against Jordan's postgame, and Allen Houston is forced to guard MJ. Kobe is given the task to guard Pippen, and he does a decent job, but with Kukoc spreading the floor and forcing Johnson or Oakley to step outside, Jordan torches the Knicks, and the Bulls advance in a brutal 7-game war. It does not get any easier for the Bulls against the Jazz though, but Chicago offsets Utah's new lineup by going smaller. Kukoc is on Divac, Rodman on Malone, Pippen on Russell, Harper on Stockton, and Jordan on Hornacek. The series is tied at 2 before the Bulls unleash a new strategy. Just wear down Stockton. And without Eisley backing up John Stockton, the Jazz are very thin at point guard. The Bulls take turns and pressing up on Stockton, using Pippen, Jordan, Harper to pressure the ball. And not only does this cause turnovers, but it reduces the time Utah has to get into its offense. The Bulls run off the next 2 games in dramatic fashion, and Utah has no idea what hit them. In the off-season, the Celtics win the lottery and go ahead and draft Tim Duncan with the first overall pick. The Lakers, after being bounced in the second round despite picking up Shaq, are desperate to find a consistent scoring threat to be paired with O'Neal. Some of the options thrown around are Mitch Richmond and Glenn Rice, but the Lakers pull off a blockbuster and trade Eddie Jones for Jason Kidd. This does little to help the Lakers in terms of spacing with consistent shooting, but Kidd's ability to direct an offense rejuvenates Shaq. The Hornets, without Divac and facing a loaded Eastern Conference, aren't satisfied with just being an 8th seed, and they start to offload some big contracts to start a rebuild. Glenn Rice is traded to Philadelphia for Jerry Stackhouse and teams up with a very young Allen Iverson along with Larry Brown. The Sonics implode with the Sean Kemp and McIlvaine contract situation, and the 3-team trade involving Sean Kemp, Vin Baker and Terrell Brandon still happens. The rest of the NBA remains largely unchanged, with the exception of the Spurs, who pick up Chauncey Billups instead of Tim Duncan, as they are picking at number 3 now instead of number 1. David Robinson is back as the primary option on offense, and they are also back in playoff contention, but they're not taken seriously as contenders. Billups does much better with Avery Johnson mentoring him, but he's not enough to get them over the hump at this stage of his career. Back in the Eastern Conference, Kobe takes the offseason incredibly seriously, and he's named starter at forward for the Knicks. Despite his development, there is only one basketball to go around, and the Knicks are loaded with players eager to score. Ewing, Kobe, Houston, Larry Johnson, but the combination of not enough passing, their point guards are Charlie Wards and Chris Childs, who are in the league primarily for their defense, along with immature coaching, Jeff Van Gundy, is leading to all kinds of turmoil early on. There is sentiment that despite all the years of blood, sweat and tears, the Knicks need to move on from the Oakley and Ewing era. They end up pulling off a controversial blockbuster, sending Ewing and Houston to Orlando for Penny Hardaway and Horace Grant. The Magic were disappointed after Shaq left, and Penny likewise was disgruntled with the Orlando management. Orlando is very happy with the deal, however, because they feel they're getting 2 all-star caliber players for Hardaway. The Knicks are clearly all in with Kobe and now Penny, and they have a monster and versatile backcourt. They also have Horace Grant and Oakley, who are now reunited after playing for the Bulls in the late 80s. Both of which are capable rebounders and can contribute without having to have plays run for them, but they're undersized, and that is significant during this era. Back out west, the Lakers with Kidd and Van Exel in the backcourt may seem unconventional, but they have Kidd defending the opposing 2 guards along with running the offense. The ball moves well, with Shaq getting touches exactly where he needs to get it. Van Exel is the second scoring option, but the third option overall behind Shaq scoring and Kidd orchestrating the offense. The Jazz are a year older and not as dominant, but they're more experienced and hungry to finish the job after getting so close last season. And the West is not nearly the juggernaut it was the last year. The same applies for the Bulls, who are dealing with fatigue and injuries, and the Pacers are readying themselves to make a run at them with all their veterans healthy and Larry Bird leading them as head coach. The season is not as exciting as the previous season, but there is plenty of buzz around some of the younger players. The Penny and Kobe duo has some incredible moments, but Kobe is still young and struggles to be a consistent scorer. Philly with Allen Iverson and Glenn Rice make a huge leap, and they make the playoffs as the 3rd seed, and they take on the Knicks in an incredible 5-game series, which, when you think back, that's as long as the series could go in the first round. There were no 7-game series in the first round. But Philly, despite making to the second round, they can't get past the Pacers. The Bulls hold on against the Pacers and advance back to the NBA Finals. In the West, the Lakers and Jazz both receive very little resistance in their run to the conference finals. But once again, Malone and Stockton tear the Lakers to shreds with the pick and roll. And we have the matchup between Utah and Chicago. The Jazz look to counter the Bulls' pressure that was so effective by setting screens in the backcourt, along with pushing the ball instead of walking it up the court slowly. This forces Chicago to use the press sparingly, but it's still a factor. Chicago swarms Malone in the post, but Divac is a useful playmaker in high-low situations, and this often gets Malone isolated on the block. The games are a grind, and this series goes 7. In the 7th game, Chicago limits the amount of times they double Malone, and instead they stay at home on their shooters in Hornacek, Russell, and Stockton. Malone goes off for 30 points in the first 3 quarters, but in the 4th, the Bulls throw a variety of looks at Utah, doubling Malone one trip, leaving him one-on-one on another, pressing the Jazz full court the next. The Jazz freeze up in the most critical minute of basketball in the last 30 years in the NBA, and Jordan and the Bulls come out on top again. The threats of the lockout turn into a reality in the off-season, and the negotiations can't save half of the season. With a shortened season, the Bulls are still broken up, and the teams to beat in the East are Philly and New York. The Sprewell and PJ Carlissimo incident still took place last season, and with the Warriors ended up dealing Spree to Boston to play alongside Tim Duncan and Antoine Walker. With Boston making the playoffs, however, that means the Celtics can't draft Paul Pierce in the lottery. Inexplicably, just like in reality too, Pierce drops in the draft, and the Celtics make a move by offering a future first rounder to the Clippers. The Hornets ended up with Vince Carter in the draft, a move that dramatically alters both franchises, as the Raptors without Carter would eventually have to relocate to the United States, and the Hornets would never move to New Orleans, and with that, the Bobcats are never created. But the biggest move in the offseason is Chris Webber being traded to the 76ers for Glenn Rice. And if you're thinking that's far-fetched, think back to what happened in '98 and the Wizards dealing Webber for a 34-year-old Mitch Richmond to Sacramento. If anything, I'm overestimating the Wizards here. Regardless, with Iverson and Webber, along with Larry Brown, the 76ers look to be in a strong position to make a run in the playoffs for years to come. Those moves mean the Knicks are looking awfully thin inside, but there simply isn't much left in terms of expendable big men. New York takes a gamble and trades Oakley for Marcus Camby, just like in real life, and the Knicks lineup of Camby, Horace Grant, Larry Johnson, Kobe and Penny will have to do. Pippen still lands in Houston, and the Bulls break up as Jordan goes into retirement, and then Phil Jackson heads off for his sabbatical. The Lakers take a chance with Rodman, but the Jazz are considered the team to beat heading into the season. The Knicks struggle to get any kind of consistency, and by mid-season they fire Van Gundy and replace him with Phil Jackson. The move takes the league by surprise, and the Knicks instantly start to play a much more structured brand of basketball. The triangle is in full effect with Penny Hardaway as the featured post player and forces teams into all kinds of bad matchup problems. The Celtics run away with the top record in the conference, but the Sixers and Knicks are primed for another playoff showdown, this time in the second round. Webber causes New York all kinds of problems, but the huge backcourt of Penny and Kobe gives Iverson fits. In the conference finals, the Celtics have Duncan playing well, but with Pitino coaching him, he can't control Sprewell, and the Knicks poises too much as they advance to the NBA Finals. In the West, for the third straight season, the Jazz and Lakers square off, and for the third straight year, the Jazz outlast them. The Lakers with Rodman implode, and Del Harris is fired. Utah looks primed to finally win their first championship, but with a starting backcourt of Hornacek and Stockton, and especially at their age, they get torn to shreds by Penny or Kobe, and it's the Knicks that claim the title. The result sends shockwaves throughout the league. The Lakers make a move for Pippen in the offseason, who is disgruntled after a disappointing season with Houston. But the big problem for the Lakers remains, and that's scoring in the fourth quarter. And rumours begin to surface about Jordan finding the itch to play again. With Shaq, Jason Kidd, and now Scottie Pippen, Jordan returns to the NBA to play for the Lakers. Are you kidding me? And before you say Jordan would never play for the Lakers, well, he went and played for Washington just for the hell of it. One of the provisions that Jordan puts on him coming back is Rodman returns for one season. So they've now got a dream lineup of Shaq, Rodman, Pippen, Jordan, and Jason Kidd. The Lakers also need a new head coach, and they bring in another familiar face to Jordan and Pippen, and they get Doug Collins. The rest of the league is now scrambling to find a way to compete with this. The super team doesn't even describe it, that has been assembled. And the Knicks need to do something about their inside presence, or lack thereof. But as defending champs, there aren't a lot of teams that are willing to do business with them. What they do have in their favour is the development of Kobe, who is becoming very comfortable in dominating the game offensively. What New York also has to be concerned with is Miami picking up Sean Kemp off the scrap heap, and also prying away Allen Houston from Orlando. Suddenly, the East is loaded with genuine contenders. New York, defending champions. Boston, with Tim Duncan. Philly, with Iverson and Webber. Miami, with Sean Kemp, Alonzo Mourning, and now Allen Houston. Indiana, with all those veterans. All these teams are very capable of becoming champions. The West, though, especially with Utah declining, is all about the Lakers. Kidd is spectacular on offense, making sure everyone gets their touches, and Shaq and Jordan play off each other perfectly. On defense, Shaq is held accountable by Jordan and Pippen, and there are no weaknesses on this team, and they win 65 games without having to even get out of the second gear. In the East, Patino freezes in the moment and trades Paul Pierce for Anthony Mason. Once again, if you're questioning this, think back to what he did in reality when he traded Chauncey Billups in his rookie season for Kenny Anderson. And, of course, that trade goes to Charlotte. So Vince Carter and Paul Pierce are now teammates. In a strange sequence of occurrences, the Raptors traded All-Star Tracy McGrady to Seattle for Gary Payton after McGrady said he was done with Toronto after the season. Seattle, now in rebuilding mode, they were eager to take T-Mac. Payton, however, was hardly thrilled by the decision and refused to report to Toronto. This led to Philadelphia picking him up for virtually nothing, and the Sixers have a dream backcourt mate for Iverson and Payton. The East is as loaded as ever, and the Knicks do lock up the number 1 seed, largely due to the fact that Kobe continues to develop despite being NBA champion. But in the second round, they have to face their rivals in Miami. In a brutal series, the Knicks escape and Kobe looks to be the exception to nearly every rule written in basketball. Miami had a huge edge inside with Alonzo and an in-shape Kemp. Forget Cleveland, Riley gets everyone back in shape, along with shooting and scoring threats from the outside in Allen Houston and Jamal Mashburn. But Kobe puts up 33 points per game on 52% shooting and 36% three-point, along with 7 rebounds per game and 7 assists per game. And if you're thinking, no way, there's no way he puts up these numbers. These are the exact numbers that he put up on the Spurs in 2001, so don't tell me no way. But based off his performance, people start questioning whether we are seeing the best player of all time develop right in front of our very eyes. On the other side of the bracket, Philly, despite the pickup of Gary Payton, they are unable to overcome a late season injury to Weber, and they lose to the Pacers. So we get the Knicks versus the Pacers. The Knicks win the series in 6, and now we have the mother of all showdowns. Kobe versus Jordan, Penny versus Pippen, Phil Jackson versus Doug Collins. Okay, that one doesn't have much appeal, but neither does Shaq versus Camby or Shaq versus Horace Grant. But if anyone can figure it out, it's Phil Jackson. And all of this showdown will be played in the 2 biggest markets in the United States. Wow. Ultimately, the Knicks with Kobe and Penny are stifled at every opportunity. The Lakers have great defenders at every position, outside of Shaq, of course. And even that's not much of an issue because Horace Grant and Marcus Camby, they're not going to do anything. Shaq is dominant, putting up over 30 points per game. Jordan holds, and emphasis holds, the word holds, Kobe to 28 points per game on bad shooting numbers. Kid is all over Penny, and if Penny goes into the post, Pippen switches on him. We all believe the Knicks have a shot based off what Kobe has done in getting to the finals, but they fall in 5 games. Shaq is named finals MVP, and Jordan and Pippen win their 7th title and their first without Phil Jackson. With such a resounding victory, the Knicks need help inside to slow down Shaq, and they find it in unlikely sources. David Robinson and Karl Malone, longtime rivals, are desperate for their first championship, and at this stage there is no better opportunity than in New York. Both take the league minimum, just like Karl Malone and Gary Payton did in 2003 with the Lakers. And the Knicks finally address their issues of having an inside presence. In addition to that, New York trades Larry Johnson for Glenn Rice. Now things are really heating up as Jordan, Pippen, and Rodman are all approaching their 40s, but they still have Shaq and Kidd carrying the offense. The Knicks have Penny and Kobe, and with some aging superstars willing to be role players in order to get a championship. In many ways, these teams mirror each other. And this, unfortunately, is where I'll have to cut it short. I know. But as I mentioned before, the full career trajectory of Kobe being drafted by the Knicks will be available in my next book, along with Carmelo being drafted by the Pistons and Durant being drafted by the Blazers, along with the next 2 hypotheticals in NBA draft history, as well as all kinds of hypotheticals in NBA history, including trades, coaching decisions, teams being broken up due to a variety of factors, injuries, you name it. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you next time when we continue this series and we're looking at what if the Celtics didn't draft Larry Bird prematurely at the number 6 pick. And what I mean by that, you might be thinking, hold on a second, premature? And how the hell did Larry Bird slip to the number 6 pick? He was actually drafted while he was still eligible to play in the NBA. There was a little NCAA rule that for some reason only Red Auerbach knew about. And that is, you could draft a player without them being technically declaring their eligibility. And so what happened was he drafted Larry Bird with the 6th pick in the draft whilst Bird was still in college. And of course they changed that rule now. And they changed it back then too, after that little exploitation. But regardless, that's how Red Auerbach got Larry Bird a year before Larry Bird came to play for the Celtics. So the next topic for the NBA Draft Hypothetical Series, boy, that's a mouthful. I got to come up with a better name than that. But the next topic will be, what if Larry Bird was actually drafted in the same class as Magic Johnson? And does Larry Bird end up in Chicago then? Because Chicago had the number 2 pick. If he doesn't end up in Chicago, that means Larry Bird goes to the Lakers, which I don't see happening because the Lakers really wanted Magic. So Larry Bird in Chicago, wow. That's another topic. And of course, history is dramatically altered then, because do the Bulls still get Michael Jordan? I guess it's possible because it wasn't even a lottery back then. The lottery was in 1985. We'll have to have a look at it. You'll have to stay tuned to check it out. Anyway, thanks so much for joining me, guys, and I hope you enjoyed the show.